this business venture as a means to address not only economic hardships, but also social and environmental ones as well. We hope to address key aspects of the industry, our solution, and how it aligns with the goals of sustainability, feasibility, and an overall uplifting of the Guatemalan people.
We were struck by the size of the coffee industry in Guatemala and tailored our solution to this particular market. It'll help to understand the value chain for this industry before we present our solution. The process starts with the farmers at the cultivation phase. Then it moves to the roasting and packaging phase. The coffee beans go through separate roasting, cooling, blending, and sometimes grinding phases before finally being packaged to send off. Here we see the most waste produced both from emissions and raw materials, most notably coffee chaff, which is simply discarded by most factories. Finally, the coffee reaches the end market where it's brewed and disposed of. The coffee chaff portion really struck us, and we decided to focus our solution on that.
We identified Antigua as our ideal location for this business. There's a large concentration of coffee production, strong transportation infrastructure, and an abundance of plastic waste that can be utilized in our production stream. When creating this business venture, we identified potential roadblocks and recognized that Guatemala is a highly fragmented at the farmer level. Nevertheless, we believe our proposition yields an outstanding value add on multiple fronts.
Now moving on to our proposition. We believe that chaff is an underutilized resource in Guatemala. Roasters see chaff as a nuisance and a wasteful byproduct of the coffee production process. In fact, most coffee roasters give chaff away for free. Our business model implies that we purchase the chaff from the coffee roasters and farmers for 5% of the price of 1 pound of beans. This is a realistic assumption, as roasters are currently scrapping this product and there is not a market for other firms to purchase this resource. This graphic provides some important context to where chaff is produced in the coffee production process. It is a byproduct almost immediately after the beans are harvested and prepared to be roasted. We plan on innovating upon the residue management processes currently in place.
The concept of putting coffee chaff to good use is gaining popularity. Notably, McDonald's coffee chaff is used by Ford to produce headlamp housing. Chaff has been found to be more durable, lighter, and since it's nitrogen-rich, reduces overall carbon emissions. On a larger scale, chaff has replaced natural gas to power ethanol plants around the United States, reducing energy costs by around 80%. Using current innovations, we wanted to use coffee chaff to address a key issue in Guatemala, specifically for factory workers: respiratory health. 66% of facility workers reported upper respiratory symptoms, as many farmers and factories are exposed to coffee dust. We hope to use the chaff plastic to produce protective masks, gloves, and other supplies to sell to factory and plant owners to improve the health of their employees. This seamlessly aligns with Guatemala's push for sustainability, specifically within the coffee industry. Efforts from large intermediaries like Starbucks through the Sustainable Coffee Challenge from the Paris Agreement in 2016 have pushed coffee producers to adhere to health and safety regulations if they want to remain in business.
Now to touch on some of the sustainability aspects of our business. The chaff to plastic process impacts environmental sustainability in 3 important ways. First, there are massive energy savings realized by producing chaff plastic compared to the alternative. In the McDonald's and Ford use case alluded to by Kareem earlier in the presentation, they realized 25% energy savings in their production process. This is because the chaff plastics are much lighter and more heat resistant than their traditional counterparts. Second, chaff is discarded in areas that could disrupt the habitats of local flora and fauna. Removing this disruption is critical to improving biodiversity. Finally, pre-existing plastic is an input to the chaff plastic product. We plan to harvest plastic that pollutes the environment to produce our product, further improving the sustainability of the project and clearing the nearby areas of pollution.
The coffee process has several sustainable implications for families in Guatemala. Women play a significant role in the coffee production process. Despite equally contributing to factory work, female laborers are paid less than their male counterparts. A recent Guatemala study shows that the inequality gap results in women earning 51% less than men. We will focus on hiring women factory laborers and specialize them in chaff plastic production while paying them on par with their male counterparts in the industry. Through our research on female laborers in Guatemala, we anticipate more financially sustainable households and competitive factory employers who will also adopt equal pay. As mentioned before, coffee processing factories pose severe safety hazards for their workers. A steady stream of income is particularly important for laborer families, and we hope that increased safety measures will allow them to work without injury or illness. Our company strives to provide this security while implementing sustainable plastic usage, which in turn benefits the area in which these families live. Moving on to the feasibility of this project. First, we will localize the process. We used an anthropological study on businesses to inform ourselves on how to promote collaboration in a foreign country. We begin by implementing cultural orientation programs, monitoring our interactions, and analyzing our internal processes and how they relate to the host community. We hope to help disadvantaged laborer families, who are likely to be historically marginalized indigenous populations. There are two ways in which we are going to keep ourselves accountable. One, analyzing how many women we are hiring and how we are scaling our business to ensure long-term employability. And two, measuring the growing percentage of workers who have access to protective gear.
Now to touch on the chaff to plastic process. The first step in the chaff conversion process is collecting and combining the chaff with other inputs. Depending on what product we would like to make, we can tailor our inputs to make the plastic either more rigid or more malleable. The next step in the process involves the machinery that we plan to buy. We have identified the Everplast plastic composite extruding machine as the best machine to turn chaff into plastic. This process essentially involves heating the chaff in a low oxygen chamber and combining other additives identified previously. The final step involves molding the newly formed plastic into products that we wish to sell. This is accomplished through the use of mask, apron, eyewear, and glove molds. The plastic is heated and molded to fit the form of each product. We estimate this process to take roughly 6.5 minutes from start to finish.
Now looking at the costs, we broke down each of the individual components we foresaw our business using. PP&E will see a heavy initial investment. In order to determine how scalable our model is, we took a look at the potential income generated from our venture. We forecast unit sales for each of our main product lines. Now on the expense side, we break down each of the relevant categories and use real-time economic data to forecast costs. Now finally, we believe there's a real path to profitability by year 2, and we actually budget in the first 2 years of expenses during the ramp-up period. So we actually generate net income in both years.
So in addition to solidifying our innovation, we took a deeper dive at the risks associated, weighing both the risk magnitude and probability. For market risks, we understand the widespread level of corruption that may interfere with a new business, as well as short-term fears of decreased production. We hope to address the lack of understanding of the product using the farmer relationship budget, as my colleague Abe previously mentioned. Financially, it's important to consider the variable costs of maintaining a scalable production stream, which we address in our income projections. It's important to consider how the path to profitability can empower the Guatemalan people, and we hope to do that through our grassroots efforts of making the business Guatemalan run. Lastly, from a social lens, we hope to cooperate with the Guatemalan people, specifically marginalized communities, to teach them these production methods in order to provide them job security, income equality, and environmental sustainability for the years to come.
Let's move on to our vision. We divided our 12-month timeline into 2 sections, factory processes and community relations. We chose these months based on the coffee harvest period, November to April, where most of the chaff is produced. Simultaneously, we will begin assembling machinery while starting communication with local processes. After months of relationship building, we will finalize our company board, which will have many local coffee workers. After initial testing, chaff collection, and factory construction, we will begin production and negotiate deals with local factories to buy our products. Throughout this time, we will invest in employee training, community programs, and cross-cultural exchange to make our company stable long-term and friendly for local families.
We believe our solution is a self-sustaining process, and we take immense pride in the fact that our process is entirely localized. We believe it'll benefit not only women, factory workers, and factory owners, but everyone in the ecosystem, as it cleans up plastic waste you see in Guatemalan streets and bodies of water.
At the end of the day, our mission is simple. We hope to cultivate opportunities for disenfranchised communities within Guatemala. Join us, and together we can create a unified effort to promote sustainability and equity in Guatemala. Thank you.
Awesome. Great job, guys. Now we're going to move into the 5-minute Q&A period. So judges, whenever you're ready, I'll start the timer.
Good job. I was curious how you took into account machinery maintenance and breakdowns, particularly if your chaff processing and molding equipment was built and shipped from outside of Guatemala.
Yeah, so we identified a pretty important machine called the Everplast plastic composite extruding machine. These typically have like depreciation life before they need some real maintenance of about 7 years. And seeing as our time horizon for this project is really only supposed to be 1 year before, you know, we start to sort of transition it away, or at least the way that we see our business is that we sort of transition it to the Guatemalan people. We see that this capital investment in the short term would provide, you know, the benefit of producing the plastic from the chaff for, you know, the foreseeable future.
More questions here.
I was curious how you were going to overcome language barriers in the training and processing aspects. And
And I think a part that what we looked into is the importance of having like community building before we even start our production processes. And for that, I think we realized that we wanted a lot of our board, at least half of our board, to be like local people that, first of all, are familiar with the coffee industry and familiar with how coffee processing works, but also people who can speak the language and don't have to overcome that cultural barrier. We found that if we have our board structured so that we have most of our board being locals, we can better accommodate to our host community. And that's how we were going to like eventually overcome like language barriers and cultural barriers.
And if I could add on to that, if you go back to our budget really quickly, we actually budget in around $100,000 purely for community building efforts. So that would be things like reaching out to different farmers, getting our name out on the streets, you know, getting them to prioritize us for sending their chaff in case we have different competitors flowing into the market, and just in general, that would serve as like a marketing expense. So we do actually budget this into our like 1 million that we're given.
And how much product testing are you doing? I don't see that incorporated into your budget.
So in terms of the actual product testing itself, what the way the Everplast plastic composite extruding machine works is that in order for things to even become feasible in turning into a plastic pellet, you need to have kind of these trial and error runs. Pretty much what it does is it integrates both the coffee chaff as well as the other inputs to kind of make this product that's mendable and, you know, able to create some sort of plastic sub-like product, whether that be a mask or whether that be gloves. So within the onboarding process, pretty much within the training of teaching the Guatemalans how to use the product, as well as just overall just the time horizon that we mentioned, the timeline that Meghana talked about, we believe that the sort of product testing will be done during the training itself. So that way, once that training period is done, the product will be able to kind of run itself fully functional with the coffee chaff in mind and with other things in mind as well.
And if I could also add on to that, I think it's really important to look at the use case that we talked about, because we really do believe that this project is very feasible, as McDonald's and Ford have proved that they began making the headlight covers for their cars. And this proves that the plastic produced by the chaff is able to withstand extremely high heats, and it's also very durable. So we're really, I mean, it's been done in the past as proven by this use case. And so we really see it as a viable solution to some of the problems that face the Guatemalan people.
All right, so that looks like it's all we're gonna have time for with the Q&A session. So thank you so much, team. Really appreciate it. Good presentation. So we will see you guys in the, I guess, mentoring, mingling, and then the closing ceremony. So if you guys want to leave the Zoom now so that our judges can deliberate.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice work.